Hello and welcome to another Dev Diary video for Imperator Rome in the Marius update, the upcoming 2.0 big-time addition to the game Imperator Rome. And last week, they sort of unveiled a huge military rework. You can click on the button in the upper right-hand screen to check out last week's Dev Diary, but this week is sort of a continuation of what they unveiled from last week. It's also by Trin Tragula, game designer from Imperator Rome, and of course the author of last week's Dev Diary, in addition to this one. So let's get into it. This is a good one, ladies and gentlemen. It is a good one. Hello, and welcome to another diary about warfare changes in the Marius update for Imperator Rome. Last week, and we can click on it right here, last week I described how armies, as a rule, will now be raised by levying the population as opposed to the cohort system that we currently have. Now we're going to be relying on a levying system, probably similar to Crusader Kings 3, which I predicted. This time, I will talk about standing armies and how they feature in the game. Now, of course, as it is with Crusader Kings 3, levies and men-at-arms, that's how it is in that game, are different, of course. The levies are your locals, your rabble, essentially your peasants with pitchforks that you can call up to serve, because you have authority like that. In antiquity, this time period, they're going to have the same thing. You're going to levy the population for times of conflict, and instead of men-at-arms, that concept is going to be replaced with legions. So legions are your more permanent and specialized and professional soldiers, rather than men-at-arms. And this Dev Diary is all about legions. So let's get into that. Legions, generally, is the general name for standing armies in Imperator Rome. So this time I'll talk about standing armies and how they feature in the game, right? These are called legions, drawing inspiration from the permanent legions of the late Republic and the Roman Empire. Just as last week, I want to remind you that everything you see is a work in progress. Interface numbers requirements are all subject to change. Yes, we know. Okay, let's look at this image. Cool. So what we see here, again, I'm going to point out from last time that instead of multiples of 1,000, we now have multiples of 500. So it looks like the numbers, when you call up like one cohort, the base is 1,000. Now it looks like that's 500. So you have like 2 cohorts here form 1,000 archers, 4 cohorts of heavy infantry form 2,000, and so on and so forth. What is this picture all about, you might ask? Legions represent a permanent army of professional soldiers. This form of organization required considerable wealth, and all the administrative powers of a highly centralized state, but offered a few key advantages. Firstly, by decoupling military service from membership in the class of property-owning citizens, the pool of potentially recruitable manpower was greatly increased. So this is something I mentioned in the last Dev Diary video. Before standing armies were a thing, before they burst onto the scene, in antiquity, it was not normal or conventional by any means to have a permanent standing army. That is really expensive. It requires considerable wealth to pay people to be soldiers permanently. This was a novel idea at the time, and before, military service was coupled with or tied to membership in the class of property-owning citizens. So in the game, that would be translated as noble citizens and possibly free men. So your citizenship in the Republic or city-state meant that you could A, own property, and B, serve in the army. And serving in the army, perhaps counterintuitively, was seen as a major privilege and sign of prestige and status and position and honor and all of those things. A well thought of citizen was someone who also would serve in the army, of course. But by getting rid of that tradition, by sort of decoupling the idea of military service and property ownership and status, therefore you can recruit a lot more able-bodied soldiers. I think that's probably the idea. Okay, having a core of professional soldiers meant the state could be defended without permanently mobilizing its most economically productive citizens at ruinous cost of the tax base, and those in the ranks stayed active for years, becoming hardened veterans. So they are clearly trying to draw a distinction here between what kind of people would serve in the army. So if you have to raise levies as opposed to, say, having a permanent standing army, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to disrupt all of the activity, economic or otherwise, that those people were doing when they were called up. And this will be disastrous for a local economy because all of the artisans, all of the laborers, all of the workers stop working, and you know, the economy is just basically put on hold because they have to put down whatever they're doing for their day jobs and go pick up a sword and go a warring. So, despite the high, substantially and oftentimes prohibitively high cost of standing armies, in a way, they were cheaper in the long run. Okay, for the Romans, this kind of force did not become common until after the Punic Wars, when it proved to be impractical to use levies to garrison the increasingly far-flung borders of the empire. So, of course, the time period of Imperator Rome, timeline of the campaign, goes through the Republic period to, basically what is supposed to be the beginning of the Imperial period, and of course, during that time, several Punic Wars were fought, and the Roman military, in history, was reformed several times over just the Punic Wars. And they favored levies at the beginning of their confrontation with Carthage, and by the end of it, they were favoring permanent troops because of the size, how big the empire was getting, and how impractical it was to garrison soldiers far away. Right. For the Romans, this kind of force did not become common. Oh, I just read that. Yeah. Over time, the legions came to completely replace the levied troops with permanent numbers, honorific titles, and an discrete decor that is the root of every modern army. Yeah, so a lot of these traditions, a lot of modern military traditions actually come from the Roman legions. But I digress. Let's keep going. This radical innovation in military organization dramatically transformed the Roman state and the role of a military commander. A legion is an army that acts as a permanent object and will only ever be destroyed if disbanded or its governor ceases to exist. All currently existing legions will be shown in a National Legion interface, where a legion's composition, upkeep, and history can be examined. Here you can also add, change, or delete subunits to specialize the legion to your needs or order it to be disbanded. There's a lot here. There's a lot to unpack in these 3 sentences. Let's go over that again. A legion is an army that acts as a permanent object. So it's a little different from previous, conceptions of an army. You create a legion and it's there. It's the thing. It's a thing. It's got its own identity. It's got its own history. It's got its own sort of factors that make it unique. And you won't be able to. It's a part of history. It's a fact of life. Okay, and I think that's really cool. All currently existing legions will be shown in a National Legion interface, where legion's composition, upkeep, and history can be examined. So this personalizes all the legions. One thing, a tip that I have used in the past, and it's a really good way to make your Imperator campaign more personalized and more fun, I like to rename my stacks and give them a bit of personality, give them a bit of history, and I like to have a couple of big stacks, not too many armies, and then and name them, give them names, like the Army of the West or whatever, and then you can remember them, and it's just having named armies and named stacks really brings character to what you're trying to do, and it helps you remember them a lot better, and it's a lot more fun. And then this takes that concept and just turns it up to 11, which is desperately needed. So it's not just your soldiers, but it's also the history and identity of the legion that's forming, basically just as a matter of course, just as raising an army. And also, this last sentence is very intriguing. Here you can also add, change, or delete subunits to specialize the legion to your needs or order to be disbanded. And we learned last time that subunits are going to be another focus of the Imperator Rome 2.0, rework these sweeping changes that they're making to the military portion of the game. And subunits will be culturally based. I'm super looking forward to that. Very looking forward to how units can mix and match. You'll be able to mix and match units like that and under your Legion tab and organize them that way. Okay, unlike levies, the troops in the Legion will require maintenance as they are professional soldiers. So levies, I guess, do not require maintenance, but the economic burden that they impose is they disrupt the normal economics and financial activity going on in your borders. All right, so that's the trade-off there. Okay, next session, creating a legion. This is new. Okay, Cassandros led Macedon in the victorious siege of Pydna. Oh, okay, so here. Oh, that's really cool. So this is the military tab that reworked military tab. You see it over here. And yeah, this is the history of the legions they were talking about. So when you have this, triangle, square, circle image here, that means that that's a placeholder. There's no image yet, work in progress. But what we care about here is the history of this particular legion. So this is the, I don't know, is this the name? The Macedonia Legion? I'm not sure. Cassandros led Macedonia in the victorious siege of Pydna against Olympias, mother of Alexander the Great. Oh. Cool. Alright, so they're going to include a lot of information, apparently, in the Legion history. And this is great. This is really a great way to make your playthroughs unique every single time. Every single time, and to make you really care about your legions and the people commanding them. Now, your commander is also going to be a big part of the legacy of your legions. You'll remember who led them. It's going to be a place of a title of honor, and so on and so forth. It's really cool. Okay, the Legion interface, very much still a work in progress. It does look a bit, yeah, a bit work in progress. Like, let's actually take another look. Armies in Legion. We're just looking at this. This is the history, but they also have the composition here. So we have heavy cav, heavy infantry, light cav, light infantry, some supply stacks. These look like, sappers, which I know are also new. And yeah, that's the new unit. So I guess this is the maintenance that they're costing. There are 500 of them. Or the support units or something. And this is what they're costing every month, I guess. Very cool. Alright, as you can see in the screenshot, legions are created from the National Military Interface, where they occupy their own tab. And there are two other tabs here. Here's the legions tabs on the far right. We got levies in the middle, and traditions, military traditions, which was a few dev diaries ago. They talked about that in the same tab. So all three of these tabs make up the military section on the left-hand side panel now. Much like levies, legions are raised from a region under a governor, and each unit in the legion reduces the potential levy from the same region by 1. It's tied to pops. The levy size also acts as an upper limit on how many units can be added to a legion, where a levy consists of an assortment of units based on the culture of the pops being called into service. The troop composition of the legion itself is entirely up to the player, as long as the country can afford it, and as long as the circumstances allow for it, presumably. This means that as long as a unit type can be levied anywhere in your nation, you can also recruit these units for your legions. Additionally, you have control over support cohorts like supply trains and engineers. Right? I was calling them sappers. I meant engineers. Right? Siege engineers. They also do sapping. You know what I mean. Yeah. Adding units to a legion will come both at an upfront cost of gold and manpower, as well as a maintenance cost over time. Cool. That's to be expected. They're gonna cost money. Fielding an army isn't cheap, especially fielding one permanently, every day, every year, for the rest of time. That costs a lot of money, and that's going to be reflected here. And it's it's a trade-off, sort of between a rock and a hard place. Do you want levies that will, drastically disrupt financial and economic activity when you do have a war, or do you want a standing army that you have to pay constantly? This is something that you will have to decide as a leader in this time period. At the start of the game, the vast majority of countries in the world are unable to create legions, and in order to change this, a republic or monarchy must adopt the appropriate military reform laws. Yes, I love this. I sort of anticipated this because they made the Punic Wars historical example. This is something you're going to have to earn. You don't just start, well, although it says very few, the vast majority of countries in the world are unable to create legions. So that means that some can. Some of the countries in the world will be starting with the ability to create legions. That's interesting. But by and large, typically, what's the intention here is you're going to have to earn this. You have to make it so that you reform and develop your military to the point where you can use legions that are seen as more sophisticated, more advanced, and an improvement on levies, right? So that's an excellent way to portray the evolution of a country over the course of a campaign, and I like it. Okay. A tribe, on the other hand, has a longer path to be able to field legions, as doing so will require them to first reform their government along either Republican or monarchist lines. So that's good. I don't think tribes should have legions. Of course, they are known. I mean, they're primary elements. The things that what makes a tribe is their decentralized, hordish nature, not a centralized, highly organized roster of different legions who are disciplined and form lines and have battle tactics and go to fancy commander school and the like. Tribes don't do any of that. Okay, they're ferocious in their own way, different in a tribal way. And in order to actually field legions, you have to become it's not that. You have to become landed and civilized and go to academies and the like. So maybe before 2.0 comes out, we will see a little bit more on tribe military mechanics and the like. We haven't seen anything on that yet, but I imagine that they're not going to change that much, right? It's the legions are really applied to republics and monarchies, the quote-unquote civilized countries. Laws can require there to be no legions at all, allow you one legion in your capital region, or allow you to recruit legions freely as long as you can support them in all regions under your control. That's interesting. So creating that is under the general tab here. No, not Republican, not monarchy. So laws can limit the amount of legions you have. That's very interesting. So that's something you're gonna have to maneuver around. If you want unlimited legions, you're gonna have to make it happen, man. You're gonna have to make it happen. Okay, let's move on to Republican military reforms. The requirements for the Punic reforms for Rome, unlike what the current tooltip would have you believe, the requirement does not actually care about how many ports you have. Okay, let's take a look. Alright, so this is the laws tab of the government section here. We've seen this before. Government offices laws. And now we have an example of a law that we can change here as Rome. Enact Punic reforms. What this will do, we'll be able to raise a legion in the capital region as a law. It's not a tech. It's not give you the ability from a scientific or practical perspective, but from a legal one. All right. So passing this law, the Punic Reforms Law, will allow you then to recruit a legion in the capital region only. Apparently, levied citizens are at the core of the Roman Republican society, and the system must remain the main part of our armies. Nonetheless, wars against Carthage and Macedonia highlights the need to lighten the old recruitment rules, allowing even those with little property to serve. Likewise, the levy must to be supplanted by a more elastic force, always ready to hurry to do the Senate's bidding. Very nice. Cool. So this is just one. Okay, Punic reforms here. It would seem to me this is one law out of possibly several to get you to the point where you have unlimited legions, right? So here you get one legion in the capital as sort of a compromise. Like, we don't really want this, but we kind of have to have it because of the expanding nature of our military situation. We're just fighting the Macedonians. They're tough. We're just fighting the Carthaginians. They're tough. Our levies are just really not holding up, but we want to maintain our military tradition of citizen soldiers, blah, 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 blah. So we're going to crack that tradition just a little bit here by allowing you one legion. Now, once that's been normalized after a generation or two or a century maybe, the stigma of a legion, the stigma of allowing in soldiers who don't own property, right, is no longer, the culture doesn't care anymore, presumably. It's moved on from that, and you'll be able to gradually then enact more reforms that give you even better standing army laws that, that care less and less about the things that made it harder to field a standing army before, if that makes sense. Okay, let's move on. Military reform laws have been redesigned for both republics and monarchies in the Marius update, allowing you to decide the size of the levy you want and to what extent you can recruit legions. Republics will by default feature larger levies than monarchies, but also have a slightly harder time unlocking the laws that allow them to raise legions. Right, they said something about that in the last one. Okay, so martial advances. Here's a new screen. We already did have a dev diary on sort of text, new tech screens, tech trees galore, in fact, and you can check that out. I invite you to. And here we get an updated look at martial advances. So we have a nice looking tree here. We have this example of cohorts, although it's not that easy to glean exactly what it is. Law for raising legions really can now be enacted. Right, so you got to go down this track. As opposed to the legal track was what we saw above. This is the tech or science track to make you just capable of knowing about it to do it. And it'll be really interesting to see how these two things interplay with each other. Okay, enacting the law of Punic reforms in Rome or the Provisioning Act in another republic will unlock the ability to form a legion in your capital region. This law requires that your country is at least a major power, and you have researched the professional soldier's invention in the martial invention tree. To be able to recruit legions in any region, the Republic needs to unlock the cohort's military invention, as well as reaching the rank of great power. Okay, so in order to get legions, you gotta be big. You gotta be big. You have to be a serious player on the world stage already before you can even access legions. That's interesting. I wonder how that's gonna play. All right, take a look at this military monarchy military reforms. So we have the military reforms down here. This is the Antigonid Kingdom now, not Rome. So we do not have the Punic reform. We have Royal Guard. What did they say it was? Provisioning Act. Right. So where's the Provisioning Act? Oh, Provisioning Act in another republic. Right. So it doesn't have to be republic. Okay. Anyway, here's the military reforms: noble retinues, military service, mercenary contract law, Royal Guard. Royal Guard will be able to raise a legion in the capital region. Right. So that's the same as the other one we've been seeing for republics. Doesn't say how these differ, of course, but I'm guessing that noble retinues is the most hardcore, purest version of what I'm talking about, with the whole idea of landed aristocracy being the ones to fight the wars. Right. Okay, monarchy military reforms. Monarchies will have somewhat smaller levies, but by default the republics do, but in return all they're required to be able to raise their first legion is to be a regional power. Additionally, all the Diadochi kingdoms start with this law enabled, and with a legion already existing in a historical location. Alright, so it says the vast majority will not get legions in the beginning, but the Diadochi kingdoms will. Okay, they'll get one in a historical location. And I do wonder where that will be. Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's finish this here. Monarchy, okay, where are we? To be able to raise legions without restriction, a monarchy is required to be of the same rank and have the same inventions as a republic. Fair enough. Alright, so the next section is Legion History. Before we start reading, let's take a look at this image. Right, we already saw this version, the Macedonian version. This is the Antigonid version. So I guess this is the Legion of Syria. Antigonus led Syria to victory. So Syria is the name of the... okay, it's kind of weird. Work in progress, right? Okay, our laws only permit the raising the legion in our capital region. Okay. That's interesting. Okay, so they give you history here and composition on the bottom. Alright, since legions are permanent military units, they never really go away, barring strolls down to Cannae or through the Teutoburger Wald. So those are two historical examples of Roman legions being demolished, destroyed by enemies. Over the course of a campaign, a legion will keep track of all major battles fought, its past commanders, and of course any honors or dishonors that it earned during its existence. The history of a specific legion can be viewed in the army interface, as you can see in the screenshot above. The legions that exist at the start will allow you to see the history of what they accomplished in the years before the game began. Right. Let's go back up to this image. Where it says, Cassandros defeated Olympias. That is before the events of the game. So I did not think that Olympias was a character. If I'm wrong about that, correct me. I don't think you can actually play as her. I don't think, yeah, I really don't. But anyway, but I do know that Cassandros, he did some pretty mean stuff to Olympias, historically, as well as defeating her forces in battle. And this is before the game starts. So here's the Macedonian phalanx and its own history. The honors and dishonors. So these are things, now they have one flavorful thing to do with like Roman armies currently that I don't think exists for any other faction in the game. And that's the eagle. So if you lose a battle with one of your stacks as the Romans, you can lose your eagle, and this has pretty bad consequences for you, and you want to get it back, really, as quickly as you can. We know from history that the Roman eagle had sacred importance to a legion. If it was gone, that was a huge bad omen. It was a sign that they'd been forsaken by the gods, this and that, ill omen, bad fortune, so and so. And they reflected that with you can lose your legion's eagle, your army's eagle currently. That would be an example of a dishonor, I think. I can speculate that that's dishonor. Not sure, but let's keep going. Throughout its lifetime, a legion will partake in many battles and may suffer defeats or win victories. Especially notable events may result in the Legion earning a distinction, something that marks its past deeds and the impact they have on the spirit of Legion going forward. So if you're like, I don't know, you pride yourself on some of the history that you've had before, maybe that'll boost your discipline or your morale or something. Alright, sources of honor can be things like great battles, their leaders earning triumphs, or capturing an important city. Dishonors, on the other hand, come from more deplorable actions such as sacking a holy site, rampant looting, or embarrassing military defeats. Alright, so you have options, right? So you can, once you could desecrate holy sites, take the treasures for yourself, and all that. You can even desecrate holy sites of your own religion because you want the treasure inside, right? That will bring dishonor to your unit now, and I love that because whenever, let's say, a rival of mine sacks my holy site, I want to get them back for that. And something pops up currently that says, like, hey, we'll get you back for that, blah, but we're not going to remember it. Now, that legion, that unit, I suppose, I guess it's only a legion that can be remembered like this, but it will be remembered for having done such a dishonorable action. And conversely, maybe we'll have an actual reason to give triumphs now. I hardly ever do triumphs for my generals unless, you know, desperately or very specific situations to get some loyalty, because there's really no reason. The cost is so high. Why would you do it unless you really need it? But now this can up the prestige of a legion, I guess, which is pretty cool. I like that. I like that. I like the honors and dishonors concept. And especially, it's like winning great battles. So if you win an underdog battle, like, you know, you'll be remembered like the 300 or whatever of Sparta. But if you lose a huge battle, that legion, shame will be brought to that legion, which I think is great. Okay, when an honor or dishonor is attained, an event will pop to describe how this came to be. It's not here, really. First, let's look at this image. This is the same history and composition of a legion, I think. This one for Egypt. I'm not sure. Now, is this the leader of the legion, and then you can have other people fighting, other characters fighting in it? Not sure. Okay. When an honor or dishonor is attained, an event will go to pop. Well, an event will pop to describe how this came to be. Both honors and dishonors will leave permanent marks on the specific legion, visible in the legion interface, and conferring a permanent bonus or penalty to it from that point on. So I'm not seeing any. I mean, I see this commander is giving a good modifier. There's zeal, extra morale, and loyalty gain. Less loyalty gain. So I'm not sure. I'm not really sure how that's going to work. That doesn't show it, and it looks like there's an image that's not loading here. Okay. When an honor or dishonor is attained, an event will pop to describe how this came to be. Right? Both honors and dishonors. Oh yeah, I already read that. They will also have a name and description of that together with the entry in the legion's history to remind you how they were earned. That's really cool. Okay, legion commanders, legates, and tribunes. Alright, let's take a look at the screen. Okay, so I was right, you can insert other characters here. Commanders, a tribune. The first entry will always be a legate. Okay, so it looks like this is a legate, and the other three are tribunes. Maybe. First entry will always be a legate, and it looks like you're giving this fourth option here, opportunity to add a tribune. Good, that's good. I did not like at all in the current and previous iteration of Imperator Rome how only your leader, the leader of the army, is in the army. It's the only character that's actually fighting. When, you know, in history we know that Demetrius and Antigonus were on the field together, for example. And I don't like that. They can't be slain. They cannot be slain in battle. They only get captured if you lose a battle, maybe. But you should be able to get slain in battle even if you win, right? That's how CK3 is. They should do that here too. I don't see why not. All right, let's keep reading with legion commanders, legates, and tribunes. The main commander of a legion is now known as a legate. This is the person responsible for the legion. The legate earns a comparatively high salary and will be the default commander for the main army belonging to the legion. Apart from the legate, each legion can also have up to 3 tribunes assigned. Tribunes are characters that do not command a legion, but are still considered to be employed, making them unable to hold other jobs. Now, we can use this. There need to be more jobs, definitely, because especially how it's tied to great families and their the degree to which they're pleased or displeased with you if you give them a job or not. I like that. I like that system, and the need to satisfy the great families in your realm. And another way to do that now, they've added four new positions, right? So hopefully being a legate or a tribune counts as being employed, and it placates the great houses. Should an army be split from the main army in the Legion, the default commander will be one of the tribunes, and a tribune will also automatically take the place of the legate if he or she should fall in battle or otherwise die while serving. Okay, so now it looks like they are making it feasible, possible. It could happen that your commander, now known as a legate, is slain in battle. Hope so. Since commanding armies is a full-time job for the legates and tribunes, unlike the governors that command your levies, these are positions very suitable for characters with good military skills. So, your typical levies are run by your governor, which means there are other considerations to make than military. You need a governor with good finesse, with good charisma, with good zeal. You need, governors really have to balance their abilities. However, for Legion, since all they do is military stuff, you don't need to. You can just forget everything I said about governors and the armies that they lead. You want your best martial characters leading your legions. That might be a bit evident, but thought it was worth saying anyway. Okay, it is also worth remembering that since units can become loyal to your commanders and convert to loyal veterans if disbanded, these are positions that can over time become dangerous. Right, so you do not want to get a legate or a you don't want to let a legate or a tribune get too powerful. What was Julius Caesar, after all? Well, I think he was a consul. I don't know what his title was exactly, but he was the head of an army, a general. I think he was a legate, and of course that gave him a huge power base that the Republic itself was unable to stand up to. I like that dynamic is being reflected here. So you cannot let them become too powerful. Sure, give your legions to capable commanders, but don't let those capable commanders get the better of you. Okay, especially since disbanding an army under a disloyal commander is impossible, though you may be able to convince them to leave their command in return for a triumph in the capital. Cool. Good. You can negotiate. You can give them something they want, even if they're disloyal and being annoying. This is good. This is a good change. Okay. Well, some of this is familiar from the current version of the game. There's a significant difference here in that military commanders only become a danger to your state once you've begun to create permanent armies. Okay, so only the legions, the permanent armies, the standing armies are dangerous. Levies are not dangerous. That's interesting. Because, yeah, that's not enough power, I guess, to parlay into someone who can legitimately threaten usurpation of the entire system. Because that is what happened with the advent of standing armies, at least in one instance. Before that, you might still have a reason to fear your governors, who at times can become quite powerful, but you won't really see the type of commanders with large armies loyal to them personally until you start relying on legions. That's great, because the disloyal armies that pop up now, yeah, I can appreciate why they're there, and I would not want to get rid of them, but it seems rather arbitrary sometimes. This is something of a change of pace, one we feel better reflects the evolution of the maturing Roman Republic and the path to empire. I think that's true, right? So if you don't have a permanent standing army, the levies, you can't really parlay that into grand imperial ambitions, because the levy, they have to go home. Someone has to go home and till the land, farm the land, do all the labor, the financial activity, pay the tax that keeps everything going. So you can have levies or you can have people working the land, but you cannot have both. Therefore, you cannot use that as a stepping stone to more power. But if you have a standing army who does not need to go home and sow the crops or whatever, well, that's a different story. Right. Ever since the levy diary, you might be wondering what is happening to military experience. Since levies are not permanent troops, you cannot really generate military experience by drilling them, and in fact, this ability is disabled altogether for levies. You cannot drill levies. Good. Good. I support that decision. While levies cannot drill, they still earn experience in battles like any unit in the game. The amount that they still have when you disband them will now result in a one-time boost to military experience, allowing you to invest in military traditions based on the experience your troops earn during their campaigns. Okay, so the units themselves don't accumulate XP, but they accumulate XP for you once you disband them. So you disband a levy unit, which you do, again, you cannot just leave them up. They have to go home and sow the crops. You don't disband your levies financial activity, economic activity is not going to resume in the place where they were called up from. Just to reiterate that point. And then, because they're not a permanent standing army, getting XP doesn't... That would just be a big waste, because you know that you have to disband them after a time anyway. So, instead, you just get the XP when you disband them, whatever they've accumulated over their shelf life in the battlefield. Okay. Legions can still drill. Okay, sorry. Additionally, all government types now have an office that contributes directly to military experience at a slow but steady pace. Cool. So you can have an office, and I guess somebody working in that office, which might modify this pace a little bit. That's another form of military experience, another source you can get it from. Legions can still drill, as in the current version of the game, and their training will continue to contribute much like any units do in 1.5. Okay, so drilling is fine. It's the same as it's ever been. It's going to be the same as it's ever been for Legions. And with that, I leave you for this time. We'll be back next week for more about what we have been working on. Okay, this was a really good, really well-prepared, very solid, very clear dev diary, expanding more on the sweeping military changes that we're going to be seeing in 2.0. But I'm very excited about it. I think the levy system and the permanent standing army system is great. I understand they call it legions because, you know, the game's called Imperator Rome, but hopefully over time we can flesh that system out to be a bit more, I don't know, universal. But I'm really liking everything they're doing here. I'm liking the levy system. I'm liking the personality of the legions and their history, how the commander matters, how the various triumphs matter, how the battles they fought in the past matter. And those would give various boosts, debuffs, depending on what has been accomplished. What does it feel like to serve under this particular banner? What's the history there? What's the tradition there? So on and so forth. But I want to know what you think, so please leave a comment down below with your thoughts. Hit that like button, hit that bell notification button to get the newest videos from the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next Dev Diary. Bye-bye.